Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. I have Judge Kathleen Richey. She's the Juvenile Court Judge for East Baton Rouge Parish. Judge Richey is going to talk to us about, frankly, the invisible kids of our society and how our culture deals with them. She's going to talk about kids who are making mistakes and how we stop and help them develop the skills they need to be productive citizens of our society. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Judge Kathleen Richey.
Hey, area code 225. Now with Cox Digital Telephone, you can get unlimited local calling anywhere in 225 at no extra charge. Gonzales to Baton Rouge, Denham Springs to Zachary, and everywhere in between. Call anywhere within 225 without dialing a 1 or the area code. Join the more than 2 million customers who have switched to Cox Digital Telephone with the largest local calling area in Louisiana. Join now for just $9.99 a month. That's over 50% less than AT&T and Etel. Call now to order.
Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show Kathleen Stewart Richey. She's a judge for the Juvenile Court for the East Baton Rouge Parish. Right. Judge, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really, frankly, very excited about the show. I think this is an area of the law and, frankly, an area of our society that most folks just don't know anything about.
That's true.
Tell the folks a little bit about yourself, just kind of educational background, employment history, that kind of stuff.
Well, I grew up in Baton Rouge and graduated from Baton Rouge High, and then went to college at Louisiana Tech. After I graduated from Louisiana Tech, I returned to LSU Law School. When I completed law school, I was a law clerk for Judge Dan LeBlanc, and then went into private practice doing a lot of public government law as well as some tort litigation, but I was a part-time public defender. And
it takes a special person to do that, I got to tell you. Not
well,
many people want to do it.
I was sent as a public defender to juvenile court. I was the first public defender. The family court exercised juvenile jurisdiction at the time and had made an agreement to have a public defender sent to family court exercising
to defend the juveniles.
Juvenile law, and I was the first that went there, and I can tell you I didn't want to go. That was not anything I'd studied in law school, not an area of the law that I felt like I had any knowledge or skill with. But once I got there, found that that was where I needed to be. It was my temperament was well suited for working with kids. I found the work to be exciting and interesting, as well as challenging and often quite satisfying. I had many clients as kids who never had had anyone believe in them or stand up for them or even, you know, fuss at them when they messed up.
Just didn't show any care and concern at all. Huh?
They were basically raising themselves, and so they really appreciated the work that I did. I was in the juvenile court for 2.5 years, and then I transferred to district court, and I was in the public defender's office for several years after that. But I always missed the kid clients, and I would handle the cases for the public defender's office that might be a little more complicated. Then in 1990, when the seat for the full-time juvenile court was created, I thought that's where I needed to be, and I ran and was lucky enough to be able to.
And you've been there
since 1991.
18 years?
This will be my 18th year.
Wow. And explain, and you basically did, but basically prior to that time, the juvenile matters, juvenile delinquency, all of that kind of stuff was handled in family court.
Right.
And then statutes were passed that created the juvenile court, of which you have been the judge for the last 18 years.
Right. Juvenile court was created for this parish in 1991. January of 1991 was when juvenile court for East Baton Rouge Parish began. Family court up to that time had handled the juvenile jurisdiction, so then it was all put into one court, and I was the only single judge court at the time in the state. So I handled all of those matters for 4 years. I was the only juvenile court judge in town.
And you were the first juvenile
court judge, and the only one for 4 years.
So there's no one who has any more experience than you at this, is there?
Well, there's no one that's been there as long as me. That's true.
It's interesting, you know, when you hear about juvenile court, frankly, what kind of pops in my head are all the kids that are just a pain, they're bad, you don't want to have anything to do with them. You just want to get them out of society, and that's really not the way it is. I know it's not.
Well, those kids are there.
They're there, but you've seen the other side of it.
But
which
there
is
are a
so
lot of other types of cases that end up in juvenile court. The type of case that most people are familiar with is the delinquency, kids that commit crimes before they turn 17. And I have that small percentage of kids who are violent and dangerous to be in the community we do deal with those kids, but we also deal with kids who've made real big mistakes and just need some guidance and some consequences. I'm a firm believer that if you don't impose consequences, then a young person has no real motivation to avoid the same bad behavior. I know that in my own home, if I didn't punish rule infractions by my children, I would quickly lose control of their behavior.
Right.
So even minor offenses, I believe, require some sort of appropriate response from society and government. And I see mostly kids who have done property crimes. A lot of kids with joyriding. Kids always want to drive before they're
that good-looking car, huh?
able, right? But we do have some violent offenders who, for a variety of reasons, we have a number of kids in this community with serious mental health issues.
And they're the violent offenders?
And typically they are the violent offenders.
You know, it's so interesting, too, because you know, you cover the gambit of what you deal with. You've dealt with murderers and rapists.
I've tried murder cases in my courtroom.
Down to, like you say, the joyriders are still in a candy bar at the Circle K.
Or spray painting their neighbor's mailbox come into court as well.
It's an unbelievable gambit of cases that you have to deal with.
It's any criminal case as long as the crime is committed by a person before they turn 17.
And that's the bottom line. Your jurisdiction is basically if somebody's under age 17 and they
come to court,
get in trouble, they come in to see you.
Right. Now there is a small percentage of cases for kids that are 15 and 16 for the violent offenders that the district attorney can choose to take to district court.
And that would be the murders, first degree, second
armed
degree,
robberies,
rape.
Some aggravated rapes, aggravated kidnapping. The more violent and serious offenses, and it's the district attorney's call.
And so if they're 15
or older, the district attorney or the prosecutor can decide whether or not they're going to prosecute in juvenile court or district court.
What criteria do they use? How do they
there's a
decide
statutory criteria. The law outlines what the district attorney has to be able to establish in order to take a case to district court. The age and the type of offense are obviously the gateway, but if a child has demonstrated that they're not amenable to juvenile rehabilitation, is the way the law is written. In other words, the child has been exposed to juvenile treatment and hasn't changed his ways, hasn't rehabilitated, then the district attorney can seek to transfer the case to district court.
So the bottom line is, if it's a repeat offender and they're just not changing, they're coming.
But it is the violent offenses. And it's outlined in the law very specifically what types of cases can be transferred to district court.
It's interesting. Sean Fagan, my partner, actually I think is practicing in front of you a little bit.
Yeah, he was an assistant district attorney.
And Sean said actually he would run into situations where the older violent criminals would get the younger guys to do the violent crimes because there was potentially lesser consequence.
Right.
Because they were dealt with at the juvenile court level.
It's only been within the last maybe 6 or 7 years that a child as young as 14 could go to district court. So you had to be 15 for some offenses and 16 for some offenses to be tried as an adult. Now,
if a violent offender is tried at the juvenile court level, are the consequences that he can suffer as a result of that criminal behavior, they're just less than if you're in the criminal system?
Well, the juvenile jurisdiction ends at age 21. So the maximum sentence that a person can receive from a juvenile judge is being in custody until 21.
So bottom line is, if I murder somebody or there's an aggravated rape or something and the DA doesn't prosecute me and it's in front of you, despite what you want to do,
21 is
the most you can do if they're 15 or 12 or 20. Well, I guess they wouldn't be in front of you 20.
Generally,
17.
they're not made when they're 20.
The maximum time they're staying in prison is to age 21.
Right.
Unbelievable. All right, this is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Judge Kathleen Richey. We'll be right back.
Oh, happy day!
My cars are clear.
The picture is beautiful, thanks to Cox Advanced Fiber. It's here.
In Louisiana.
My internet's faster, thanks to Cox.
I'm using it.
We're using it.
Cox Advanced Fiber.
I love it.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, I'm pleased to have on the show Judge Kathleen Richey. She is the Juvenile Court Judge here in East Baton Rouge Parish. Let's talk about the tools that you have available to you, Judge, when you have the kids come in front of you. We've talked about those that violent offenders, and the most you can do, I guess the most serious consequence is to send them away until they're age 21.
Right.
What else?
There are some, under the law, there are some offenses where a child has to be committed to state custody for secure, which is the correctional centers.
It's kind of like putting them in prison.
Which is LTI. It's,
okay.
It's a juvenile prison.
Now, is that prison, that facility the same as a parish prison or Angola or anything? Or,
it is
or is
run by the department.
Country club, federal court?
It's run by the Department of Corrections, so it is the juvenile version of Angola. Our particular correctional system has been attacked by the Department of Justice and is under, to a certain extent, some federal court monitoring for safety issues, because kids have been abused in the correctional system.
By guards or?
Well, by both, by guards
or
and
fellow prisoners?
And inmate on inmate. The legislature recently demanded that Department of Corrections close the Jetson Correctional Center for Youth, which is up here in Baton Rouge.
Now, do they mix the 21-year-olds with the 12-year-olds or the 15-year-olds?
They're not supposed to.
But they do.
But I think that there are times when they look more at a young person's size than their age and their ability to function in a group of kids. If a 17-year-old is small and fragile, he may do better with a group of 12 and 13-year-olds. Whereas if you have a real big, burly 14-year-old, he may be fine with a 17-year-old.
But there's no guidelines?
Not in the law. There are in the policies that the Department of Corrections implement.
That is kind of scary. But
well, more scary is I cannot direct them. Under the law, I cannot tell them where to place a child. So a child that I have placed in state custody may very well end up by the department placed in a group home in Baton Rouge.
Who specifically makes that decision?
The Department of Corrections.
And who in the Department of Corrections?
Well, the Division for Juveniles, it used to be called the Office of Youth Development, and it recently changed its name to the Office of Juvenile Justice. There is a scoring sheet that the agency uses to decide where a young person should be placed. They are required to tell me where they've placed a kid on my docket, and there have been times when I have called them up and said, absolutely not, this kid would be at risk in the community.
And are they responsive?
Generally. Generally, if it's a kid that I really feel like would pose a risk to the community, and I think he needs to be in a more secure setting, they will place that child.
And are you kind of the sole monitor of that?
And I'm also the parole board. The kids can't work their way out without seeing me.
Goodness gracious alive. All right, so you got the incarceration, so to speak. What other tools do you have available to you?
Well, there are a number of diversion programs that are in existence. Baton Rouge now has a teen court, so some of the nonviolent and first offenders are being placed in the teen court program, which includes some counseling components and some community service components. It's a fledgling program. It's only been in operation a year, but it's had a remarkable success rate. It's actually operated by the Baton Rouge Bar Association.
Really?
So its biggest challenge right now is keeping itself funded.
So no state funds? Is it privately funded?
It has been funded by state funds up to this point, and the Bar Foundation has contributed in-kind services and some monetary support for the program. And we are constantly applying for grants and trying to have the matter funded. I actually have been trying to get onto the mayor's radar to talk about local funding for the program, because I think it can really make a difference for those first offenders who might otherwise not have any attention at all.
And why is it so successful?
Because it's the first time offender who is actually having his conduct addressed, and it's being addressed by his peers. The teen court functions as a sentencing court more than
so it's a group of their fellow peers that sit as the court and render the consequence to the bad behavior.
And Baton Rouge lawyers are working with these kids so that there's a prosecutor, a juvenile prosecutor who functions in the role of prosecutor, and a juvenile defense lawyer that functions in the role as a defense lawyer. There's a juvenile who's trained to function as the bailiff in the actual court hearings.
Now, what are the ages of the kids?
14 to 17.
Wow.
There are lawyers who function as the judge.
So there's guidance and overview.
Right,
I mean,
right, and it's all volunteer
right
hours by the Baton Rouge Bar Association. So they've really contributed a great deal in this program to assist first-time offenders in redirecting their behavior, and it's been very successful. For the more serious offenders or the more frequent offenders, we've got a couple of programs that have been in place that I'm really proud of. I was part of the development of the Eiger Program.
What does that stand for?
I can't explain the name of the program, but the Mount Eiger is hard to climb, so these are supposed to be the hard to handle kids. So it's like a boot camp or something? No, it's a program for intensive supervision. And it's actually received national recognition.
Really?
It has been funded through initially it was funded through the Gun Violence Partnership Reduction Act, which Congress funded for local programs that showed promise in reducing gun violence. Since then, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention has assisted in funding. Safe Schools has assisted in funding. It's been a patchwork of funding to keep the program in operation, but it's been very, very successful.
What? Is it difficult to get money for the programs
Yes.
that you know after 18 years of sitting on the bench work?
Yes.
Why? I mean, isn't this nipping it in the bud, trying to shut it down, these kids from becoming really bad, violent offenders as adults?
Baton Rouge has had some remarkable programs that have received national recognition, and we are still struggling to keep them funded and running.
Why?
I guess you'd have to ask the people who have the ability to make those funding decisions.
I mean, the primary source of money would come from the state and the city? Or?
And some private foundations and some federal funds are involved as well. And
interesting.
We just
and so the people that you would talk to, I guess, would be the mayor and the council folks and the state reps and senators in the United States.
Right.
Wow, interesting.
I mean, I've spoken with the congressional delegation for Louisiana. We're actually, we may even get a congressional grant for the teen court this time. Senator Landrieu has been a very a strong supporter of the teen programs. And so there may be an opportunity to develop some funding from the national government, but I'm not holding my breath.
Well, let me ask you, what other tools do you have? You have the
Eiger program is an intensive supervision program.
And when you say intensive supervision, what's happening?
Well, they're being checked on 3 and 4 times a week at night by probation officers. Okay. It's a labor-intensive program, and that's why the funding is such an issue. What we're paying for is not electronic monitoring. It is actual probation officers trained to go and interact with the young person. One of the components of that program used to be a life skills academy where kids went one night a week to learn how to balance a checkbook, how to do a job interview,
to give them
skills to be able to make good decisions.
Let's talk about that on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. Judge Richey will be right back.
Code 225. Now with Cox Digital Telephone, you can get unlimited local calling anywhere in 225 at no extra charge. Gonzales to Baton Rouge, Denham Springs to Zachary, and everywhere in between. Call anywhere within 225 without dialing a 1 or the area code. Join the more than 2 million customers who have switched to Cox Digital Telephone with the largest local calling area in Louisiana. Join now for just $9.99 a month. That's over 50% less than AT&T and Detail. Call now to order.
Wherever you go, everything digital will follow.
Hey, area code 225. Now with Cox Digital Telephone, you can get unlimited local calling anywhere in 225 at no extra charge. Gonzales to Baton Rouge, Denham Springs to Zachary, and everywhere in between. Call anywhere within 225 without dialing a 1 or the area code. Join the more than 2 million customers who have switched to Cox Digital Telephone with the largest local calling area in Louisiana. Join now for just $9.99 a month. That's over 50% less than AT&T and Detail. Call now to order.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show Judge Kathleen Richey. She is the judge for the Juvenile Court in East Baton Rouge Parish. Judge, we were talking about the goal of the court is to take these kids and stop what they're doing and basically help them change and give them skills to be productive.
In fact, the law says that the principles and the underlying rationale of juvenile court is to redirect kids who are making bad mistakes and balance the needs of the child against the need for safety in the community. Most of the kids that we see are kids that can function well in the community with guidance and some support services. There are a small percentage of kids that are not safe to leave in the community, and those are the kids that we put in state custody.
And you said last year you handled 4,500 to 5,000 cases.
I would say it was between 3,500 and 4,500 cases. Now, not all of those are delinquency cases.
Of that number, how many were delinquency roughly?
Well, I do know that I handled 1,065 delinquency cases.
And of those, about 10% you said are the ones that probably need to be in some type of incarcerated?
Right. I actually less than 10%. It's more like 5%. 4 or 5%.
Okay.
I can tell you that last month I got a report from the Department of Corrections. I have 27 kids in secure custody. So there were 27 folk who met the legal criteria and in my view were dangerous to leave in the community who are still in state custody.
Do we have a boot camp? You know, you see TV programs, all that stuff that talk about the boot camp and how successful they are. Do we have such a program?
Well, the National Guard runs a boot camp. It's not part of the state structure and it's not part of the court structure, but it's obviously something we work well with called Youth Challenge.
Because you seem to have great discretion and tools available to you that maybe most judges don't.
The court does have a great deal of discretion.
So do you use the boot camp?
Oh, yes.
Does it work?
The National Guard boot camp is a phenomenal program. The kids that have gone through there have always, if they finish the program. Now, I've had kids who've gone and decided it wasn't for them or the program, they didn't meet the criteria to remain in the program, they wouldn't follow the rules and they've been ejected, in which case I deal with those kids. But the kids who've gone in and completed the program have done wonderful things. They all are employed. They finish that program generally with a GED and some job skills. There's even a job challenge component that's an after program.
Wonderful.
And those kids are doing great.
Well, you were telling me earlier when we were off that that you've actually, I'm thinking of the unique tools you have. You assigned the kid to read a massive book, which he did in 2 weeks.
Right. That was a young man who'd been not in school on any kind of regular basis. His family was just really broken. He got arrested actually for building a bomb. And when they arrested him for building a bomb, they found a lot of drugs in his book sack. So he was in detention and he was cutting up. So I ordered him to read Crime and Punishment. My thought at the time was this is a real thick book and Dostoevsky is hard to get through. It'll keep him out of trouble, but he read it within 2 weeks and gave me a book report. The grammar was horrible and the spelling was atrocious, but the content was appropriate.
Huh?
He understood what Dostoevsky was trying to say.
And so you kind of intervened and stopped.
Well, and the thing is, this young man asked for another book. He asked me to assign him another book, and he later went to a boot camp, successfully completed the boot camp, and finished his GED and was accepted into the Navy, and he is now a lieutenant in the Navy.
You still correspond with him?
And I still correspond.
What a great story.
With him.
Unfortunately, we got some sad stories too. You see a lot of stuff that, frankly, I probably couldn't handle. How do you deal with that? What tools do you have available to you? Because I'm looking at you got to deal with the relationship of the child with the family or the parents, relationship of the child with the community.
There are many cases in which the biggest problem is the parent and the parent's attitude and the parent's inability to recognize what the child needs in terms of guidance and direction. I've actually had parents tell their children not to follow my orders. And I have to deal with that. I have found parents.
Can you punish the parents?
I have found parents in contempt.
Okay.
I've even actually, on a very few, but I have placed parents in jail for contempt. I had one case, one notable case. The mother had some alcoholic issues herself, and was not taking her son to drug treatment, and just it wasn't her problem, was what she said. This was a minor who couldn't drive anyway, and so I found her in contempt after repeated occasions to have her change her approach, and I put her in jail. Her husband, the young man's stepfather, called and thanked me because her problems were getting out of control, and she went from jail to an alcoholic alcoholics rehabilitation, and the family ended up healing after some lengthy time of treatment. But
how much does alcohol and booze and marijuana and all that play as a factor in what you see and deal with?
I see a lot of parents who have serious problems with alcohol, and that does impact on their ability to function as the parent in the household, leaving kids to sort of raise themselves. I don't see a lot of underage drinking anymore. Now, initially I did when I first took the bench. Again, Baton Rouge developed the Juvenile Underage Drinking Program.
Which you told me earlier was very successful.
And has received national recognition. It's called JUDE, for Juvenile Underage Drinking Enforcement, and it was a combined effort between the ABC Board, the Constable's Office, Baton Rouge City Police, the District Attorney's Office, and Juvenile Court, and it has made a significant difference in underage drinking. We've not had the same success in diminishing underage drug usage, and we have a lot of kids that are regular users of marijuana, and I have seen a lot of prescription drugs lately.
Are they, in your opinion, are they medicating their pain from parents that just don't seem to give a dadgum about it?
Well, I think these are kids who have problems, and their way of addressing their problems is to zone out with drugs.
So what do we do?
Well, I think we have to have a multi-systemic approach, because the child needs to learn how to handle problems differently than using drugs, but we also need to have the family address the family's issues in ways that will be healthy for the family too.
I don't know how you solve all these things. You know, I know there's some very sad situations that you've talked about, some wonderful though
we have
outcomes.
Some wonderful success stories.
And I know that also one of the things you love to do is the adoptions. Tell the folks about that.
Oh, well, adoptions are wonderful. We have a lot of private adoptions where families are able to create or complete their family with adopting an infant. But one of the things that is the most rewarding is the final adoption of children who I have removed from abusive families. We do have a big chunk of my jurisdiction is child protection, and I have had children who have been removed from an abusive family, and with a lot of therapy and a lot of assistance and intervention have found a family, and I've done the adoptions. I have a collection of pictures for adoption days of families, of children who've been removed from abusive families. My favorite is an infant that was found in a newspaper bag 4 hours after birth in a ditch, and that child was adopted and is healthy and happy. There was a child I had removed from the custody of her mother. Her mother was starving her.
Oh my gosh.
She only weighed 17 pounds and almost died. She was in the hospital about 6 weeks to have enough nutrition to be able to remain alive.
And now she sends you pictures every year.
And now she sends me school pictures every year. She's been adopted into a family that's just doing wonderful.
Wonderful job. The elections when?
October 4th.
October 4th. You certainly have our support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the work you're doing. This is Locke Meredith, the Legal Lines. Kathleen Richey, Juvenile Court Judge. Thank you.